everybody, it's Romania Black. We're halfway through after this episode with season 3 of Psychopaths. I've been holding back on watching this episode because I wanted to wait until a period of the week where I had time to sit down and watch this episode, because I don't know if you watched last week, but it was like a 2-hour discussion. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be 2 hours per episode from here on out, but I had a lot to say last week about episode 3, just in terms of me developing more of a rapport with the characters, more of a liking to the characters. We're getting more development with them. The show does a really good job of, again, this show reminds me a lot of Bungo Stray Dogs. It does a really good job with characters of giving you enough time with each of them to really develop a relatability and a likability to them. Like last week, we got a lot with Tima, we got a lot with Eerie, we got more with Shindo and with Kay. But the thing about it is, you get all of these little moments, but at the same time, there's still a lot of mystery with their characters, so it leaves you wanting to learn more, which is exciting because we're only 3 episodes in this season. We have a lot of content left to go. And then at the end of last week, we had the wonderful surprise of Kunazuka joining us again as a freelance journalist. What? So I'm so excited that Kunazuka's back. I'm so glad she's alive. I was really afraid that she got offed off screen and we weren't going to find out about it until like around this time, but no, the best rewards are to come. I'm really liking this season in terms of what it's giving us with rewards. Like, it is leaving us intentionally in the dark, and you start to question the show and be like, okay, why are you doing this? But then its reveals are happening in such a fun and rewarding way that it makes me have more faith in the show to be like, okay, I know there's still a lot of mysteries, like with Akane, with Kogami and Ginoza, that I don't know yet, but the show has done a really good job of satisfying me so far with these payoffs, that it makes me feel like I can wait and have faith in the show that it's going to pay off in a good way. So that's what I'm hoping anyway. I'm super excited about that. But yeah, I can't wait to see what happens this episode. We're getting more in terms of the mystery of what's going on. We still don't know what this whole Bifrost thing is. I don't know. But we'll find out, I'm sure. I don't have any comments that I want to talk about because I haven't really had the chance to look through any new ones yet. But I do want to give a special shout out over to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon before we begin, because I'm super thankful for all of you on YouTube, all of you on Patreon that support me. It's the reason I keep doing this. I'm super glad that not only do you all support me, but we build a community talking about these shows. And that's really, really important to me. That's kind of the whole reason I'm doing it. So with that in mind, I want to give a shout out to Alex Cornejo, to Anime Annie, to Be Happy, to Dana, to Destiny Marie, to Danger Zone, to Eric, to Kiri, to Elfreya, to Lyndon, as well as Matthew Palfinier, Murphew, Nicholas, Nameless Monster, Sunspots, Shimoyama, Trails, Translucent Men, Danny Donmai, as well as Dynovan, Inly 2, and Ichu. Thank you all so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. So yeah, I have no clue how long this discussion will be post episode, so we're gonna go ahead and start. My only hesitation is, and I will tell you all this, there's supposed to be like some kind of weird solar flare activity happening today that I got on this morning and saw, and I was like, what does this mean? And it could affect like internet. So I don't know if we're gonna have internet trouble today. I'm fingers crossed, knock on wood, that we don't. But this episode, I have a strange feeling. Just when I pulled it up, it was getting a little hesitant. I'm like, is this gonna be like a stop and start episode? I hope it's not, but it may be. So if you see some editing woes, I'm in the boonies. My internet is garbage. So we will see. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and start and see what we get. So let's start episode 4 of Psychopath season 3. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's make sure my subtitles are on and do it to it, Lars. Well, that was a fun episode. I don't know if we're going to have enough to talk about it to last 2 hours like last week, but this was a really good continuation. And I think probably the thing I like most about this season in particular of Psychopaths is the way that it's talking about some political items that are a bit too real at times for our own society, and they're getting into some concepts that they've been around since season 1. And that's another thing I like about this season. It's doing a lot of callbacks, it's continuity, it's continuations from season 1 and season 2 that are being incorporated and tying into this season. And some of the themes that we've talked about since the beginning of the series, we're seeing kind of the fruits of their labor and sort of how that society has developed over these last several years in the show. And I think that's really good, but it brings about a lot of interesting ideas and concepts that we need to think about. And as Shindo points out, a lot of people don't like thinking. And so it's like, there's a lot that's kind of on the nose. And for this coming out in 2019, I was like, a lot of it seems very much driven. The fact that this came out around 2019, 2020, a lot of this seems, well, I mean, they had the election was 2,120. I'm sure this came out around 2020. I mean, it's a bit on the nose, right? And I feel like a lot of the stuff they're talking about is influenced by our current history and our current media and politics and everything. But the thing that's so fascinating about it is that what they're incorporating, talking about AI and about artificial intelligence, is stuff we're seeing now. So it's interesting that it's taking a lot of modern history and a lot of modern movements and culture, and it's also integrating these other things that are kind of coming down the pipeline that it's predicting, and it's being pretty scarily accurate. So I like that about this series. Let's talk about this. I want to talk about several things in this. First of all, Kunozuka, our queen. Kunozuka, Shion's so proud. She's just like, yes. I also love, one thing that I love about Shion and Kunozuka's relationship is how they support each other. Kunozuka is not an outwardly expressive emotional person. She's not just like, oh, I love you, Shion. And Shion, for as flirty as she can be and for kind of like as nonchalant as she can be, she's actually kind of private as well. I like that Kunozuka and Shion, they keep their relationship private. I think everybody kind of knows it. Everybody's kind of like, yeah, we get it, right? Nobody's hitting on Kunozuka in this episode for reasons, and nobody's hitting on Shion in this series for reasons. So I feel like Kogami was the only person Shion would be like, I'm willing to bend the rules a little bit for you, and he was like, no. But what I like about it is that Shion looks after Kunozuka. Like when they have the drink and she's like, you don't need alcohol because it could cloud your hue. You've worked so hard. What I love about it, it's kind of like when someone goes into sobriety and they go sober, and it's like, you know, that sobriety helps them to become a better person and be able to function through society better. I like that Shion is like, she's like that partner that's supporting somebody through their sobriety. She's like, no, this is the best for you. I'm going to support you. And it's just so sweet. I love that relationship between them. It's really, really cute. I think the only one that tries to flirt with Kunozuka is Shindo, but let's be real. Shindo is like the most heterosexual character in this series. To me, I can't really ship him with Kei. I'm sure a lot of people ship Kei and Shindo, and if you do, I respect you. I feel you. There's a little part of me that wants to ship Shindo and Kei, but Kei's married. He has a wife. I ship them. Like Shindo and Kei are maybe the most heterosexual couple in anime history. There's no homoerotic coding for either of them. Kei has a wife that I want her to be able to see him. Shindo is flirting with every girl possible in this series, and I'm rooting for him to find one that works out. So, like, I'm usually all about the BL shipping in anime, but I am rooting for our heterosexual duo of Shindo and Kei, and I hope things work out for them. But yeah, and just Kunozuka instantly being like, hope you're doing all right, Hinakawa. Like, them all protecting Hinakawa are being precious. I also love when Hinakawa was like, everybody stay calm. And I like that everybody in the Colosseum kind of did what he said with the help of Yuji Shiki. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, so basically they point out, I like that Shindo is like, you're the legendary ex-enforcer who reintegrated herself into society. The legendary ex-enforcer. And she's like, oh, well, you're exaggerating. I'm not legendary. And then, of course, Shion's like, well, she got show business offers because she's so great. I feel like Kunozuka would be like a stunt double. I feel like Kunozuka would be like on a crime show and she'd be doing all her own stunts. rooting for her. I like that Shion wants to even brag on her, and Konosuke's like, please don't brag on me. Like, it's not that big of a deal. So she talks about how they've the abandoned zone transport business. So we get confirmation from last episode's quandary into how are we able to get these people from one location to the next without the scanners detecting their hues. And the answer is we just basically do a self-induced coma and transport them. It's like, oh. And the technology, that's one thing Psycho-Pass gets away with, is that the tech is so advanced in this series that you're like, oh, well, as long as there's an explanation, sure. Because there are drugs right now that can induce, there's anesthesia, there's drugs that can induce a coma-like state. We see it all the time in action movies where somebody's like transporting like a mafia guy out and they're like, oh, we put him in a coma to get him out of the situation. That's literally what's happening here. And they do establish that there are risks, but they're willing to use these people to do the risks because they're kind of nobodies anyway. They're just abandoned zone wrestlers that can go from one place to the other. One of them is a combat robot, which I liked that callback too, to say, okay, we've had this combat robot in Sinners in the System with Sugo and them, so now we're going to call back and kind of upgrade it for this one. I do miss Sugo, Genoza, and Kogami. Don't get me wrong. I really miss them. And it is not lost on me that their presence is absent this season. I think it's a testament to this show and how good it is to take 3 of its heavy hitters out and for the show not to tank. Because, 4 heavy hitters. You don't have Akane, you don't have Kogami, you don't have Genoza, you don't have Sugo. You have 4 of your main characters that were still alive at the end of Sinners in the System that are like your bread and butter for this series. And to take them out and the show still be engaging and fun to watch with these new characters, that's almost unheard of. I can't tell you an anime that I've watched where the main 4 characters that are the most prominent are taken out of a season and the show still is able to hold up. I can't tell you a series I've watched where that's happened. I can't name one. And I think that that's unique for Psycho-Pass. I think it's really good. I like it. I like the fact that we've gotten to know these characters and we like them just as much as the other ones. I'm all for that. And I kind of give Psycho-Pass mad respect for doing something that would be a very unpopular decision, but doing it anyway and succeeding with it. That to me is incredible. So kudos to Psycho-Pass. Like, you automatically are a win in my book for being able to do that. So let's get past this OP. Lots of things still left in this OP that are yet left unsaid. So the only thing I will note is the whole thing of Kei like fighting himself. In that is, I'm wondering if that's going to be like a flashback with Kei talking about Shindo's dad and all of that. We'll get to it. But Political Strife in the Colosseum was a pretty apt name for this episode. I thought it was fitting. Mika's grown on me a lot over the course of this season. We'll talk about her later on. But basically using suspended animation to transport people. That's kind of the name of the game at this point. And the people transporting aren't aware of what they're doing, so that's how it's able to all work out. And I thought they were going to tie back to Yonohara and Sugazawa's people with the transport company. I thought they were going to call back to that, but that's not necessarily the case in this. So anyway, we have Tenma and Eri transporting Shindo and going to the scene of the crime. One thing I like about Shindo's character is he's kind of like an upbeat, whimsical Akane. Akane's always positive, but I wouldn't describe her as whimsical. Positive, yes, but she always had, like, Akane's always had an air of professionalism about her, where she's nice, she's congenial, but she's never, like, just a little poppy of energy, whereas Shindo is very upbeat and, like, springy, and he's just friends with everybody. And I think it's hard to have a character be like Shindo and be so optimistic and kind of OP with his Spider-Man moves, which we'll talk about, and not make him kind of seem like a Gary Stu. But then I think that the whole mentalist angle, where he does have some mental faults and there's some darkness layered under the surface, keeps his character grounded and mysterious enough where we want to know more about Shindo. But we also accept that he's basically a Olympian gymnastic, an Olympian gymnast going through this world. Because I'm like, some of the moves he does in this episode, I'm like, you are teetering on the edge of jumping the shark, dude. It's a good thing you're likable. Otherwise, I'd be like, what the fudge? Come on, show. But yeah, So anyway, we go back to the slums and into this secret layer of Suchia and this assistant AI prototype AI. I like that in this series the technology is very staggered, and we get to see like multiple generations of technology at work. So like the secretary AI here is obviously like an older prototype. We're seeing the Maca, hey Macarena, we get that prototype in this version too. So we're seeing kind of like the evolution of technology in this series as it goes. And it's not too unlike our own society now. I know this is supposed to be like 100 years in the future, but it's not too unlike our own society, where right now you can go online and you can shop for VCRs, you can shop for DVD players, you can shop for cassette players, for vinyl players, for you can stream, you can do TV. I mean, right now you kind of have like half a century's worth of technology all at your fingertips, and it's all very random and very different, but it's all accessible to the public. And that's kind of like how the AI is here. It's sort of like the upgraded version of our own society, which is neat. So yeah, so when she said vacate the premise or will be reported to public safety, when he first showed her the past, I'm not gonna lie, I thought at first she was gonna be like, as soon as she heard he was dead, she was going to just delete all the files. That's what I thought was going to happen when she's like, oh, Dr. Suchi is dead. Time to like delete and self-destruct is what I thought was going to happen. And I was a little bit worried, but then it makes sense that if it wasn't the Public Safety Bureau, that's probably what would have happened. But because the Public Safety Bureau, Suchia wanted the police to find his work and use it to help track down Macarena. So it makes sense. I also like the idea of the AI being offline, where it's kind of stagnant and the AI is stuck in this one position of information. It's not upgraded and synced in to get information from the outside world. Also, with little pigtails in the tie, it looks really cute. I feel like Obata, who is Akusawa's henchwoman, I feel like she would appreciate this little AI because it's kind of cutesy and gothic. But yeah, so then we have the idea of the AI, of Macarena. So we're going to put Bifrost up here. We're going to put Bifrost up here because there's some stuff to talk about with them. And I want to talk about the Macarena. Not the dance from the 90s, although I'm sure people have memed the hell out of this at this point. I was thinking about it when Shindo was bouncing around and jumping through the beams during his battle with the big combat robot. I wanted somebody to just edit the Macarena song over it. Hey Macarena, and then just like crash into the beams. Could have happened. So anyway, we have Karina here is talking about how what is violence? Not something that arises when many people, what did she say, seek something at the same time. So Macarena talking about what violence is. And it's about people seeking their self-interests at the same time. Which, sure, I mean, wars are often fought because you have two sides wanting a similar thing and it's not possible in the same area. It's like in Heaven Official's Blessing, in that Donmai, there's a comparison of you have, one source of water and two cups. How do you divvy the wadi? How do you divvy the water? Do you divide it equally? Is that even possible? And if it's not possible, if you can only put water in one cup from the two, how do you determine who gets the cup? So it's oftentimes it's people fighting for the same resources, but there's not enough for both. So then it's like a decision of who gets what. And how do you determine that? So she's not wrong there. But then she says everyone wants to lead a better life, which, yeah, absolutely. Everyone wants to find the best way to do it. And that's why conflict and contempt exists between us. It's finding that balance. She's like, that's what I believe violence to be. And I don't think she's wrong in saying that. And so then as she's having this speech, they talk about cognitive load, where it kind of relates back to Shindo, the idea that your brain processes so much per day. By the end of the day, you're tired. You need to rest. You need sleep for your brain to reconstruct and reset itself, right? So essentially equating humanity to a computer. Like, something that's really interesting here is the idea of AI and humanity and the similarities between it, which I'm watching Pluto at the same time now, and that series has a huge discussion about humanity and artificial intelligence and its connections. So I'm watching a lot of things that are dealing in topics that are very current and make your brain hurt. So makes sense. But I thought it was interesting to note this because not only is it connecting to the Sybil system, which is made up of brains, but also to Shindo, who Kay has constantly told, you need to rest. You need to not overwork yourself. You're going to end up shutting down. The cognitive load is going to be too much. Right? So then we go back to Machina, and she's like, government is the only way to minimize violence and bring happiness to you all. That's why I wanted to become a politician. So in Machina's mind, she talks about here about the idea of government being able to minimize strife by basically taking on the burden, right? To make the decisions for you is essentially it. And honestly, that's been the role of government since the creation of it. You go back to Aristotle, you go back to Socrates, you go back to ancient Greece, to Roman times. You go back to even beyond before that. The idea of a governing body is that you have an avatar, a representative for the people. That's why here in the United States, you have representatives, you have Congress, you have people that represent your state, they represent your beliefs. They take on the burden of making those decisions for you, right? Because that way it seems like it's a more fair system. And in theory, as long as it goes the way it should, that's exactly, it's doing what Machina is saying, and it's going to make everyone's lives happier because you'll have someone representing you to make those decisions. The problem is when that system becomes corrupted, or when that system is not acting in the best interests of the people that it's serving, or when that system becomes something that it's not. So that's when things, when problems arise because of it, and we're going to talk about it in this episode. And Machina, in her idea of saying, I wanted to become a politician to be able to help make your lives better, sure, I believe her to an extent, but it's what are the means and ways in which you are going to go about doing that we're going to get into that make it a little bit more complicated. And then so Dr. Tsuchiya wanted to control the cognitive load externally. He wanted to control how much we could process and what we could process per day to produce speech patterns and tones of voice that would have the most influence on the human decision-making process. A new generation of artificial intelligence. Here's the scary thing, is that it's talking about an AI that is able to be persuasive and manipulative, and do so in a way that's very subtle. The problem is that's happening now. That's happening now, right? That's the problem. The problem is that these mouthpieces that are artificially created are happening now, right? And the instant they started talking about how people don't want to think, they just want people to tell them what to do. The thing I thought of very first and foremost was that people that are my parents' generation going on social media and seeing like a clickbait title or a random photo with information or something that's like, here's a fact. And then they show me that and I'm like, well, but where's your source? How do you know that's a fact? Well, because it says right here. And I'm like, yeah, that's somebody just randomly posted. There's no, where's your trail of information that shows you how true that is? And they're like, well, I don't know. Yeah, you don't know. And so there's so much out there that's just presented as manipulative rhetoric that is taken in at face value by the masses because there's people that they don't want to do research. They don't want to find where the source is. They don't want to read. They don't want to listen. They don't want to take notes. They don't want to research and find the truth of the matter. They just want it conveniently presented in front of you and you just take it as that. And that's dangerous because especially if a large group of people believe in that without questioning it, then there's a problem. So it's the idea that the Sybil system, it's like basically the Sybil system. The idea that the Sybil system is capable of making these decisions for you Don't worry about it. Don't you worry. You just live a happy life. Don't question how we got here, what's going on behind the scenes. Don't pull back the Oz curtain. Just live your life and be blind. Just ignorance is bliss. Don't worry about it. And just hope that you're not caught up like the enforcers and the latent criminals in the process. That, don't be the sausage that gets made, right? That's kind of the system that's being set up here. What's interesting is that Bifrost is totally fine with Camilla winning. And we're going to talk about that because Camilla, I thought, would be Sybil's system choice, like, right off the bat at first. It's very interesting because there's parts of both Camilla and Yukishiji that the Sybil system, I feel, would be totally invested in, right? With Yukishiji, yeah, there's the whole thing with immigrant rights that they were advocating for, that I could see Sybil system being like, well, but we don't want all these immigrants to come in because if they all come in, then they are not part of the system, and that's going to cause like strife with the system. So I'm not sure if I'm for that. But then, as we've learned with the ghettoification of part of the city, it's like, no, the immigrants can be used as scapegoats to maintain the Sybil system. So maybe we're on board with this. Okay. And Yukishiji seemed like somebody that means well, that is a nice person, but he could be easily manipulated. So I'm like, well, maybe the Sybil system would prefer him over Camilla because Camilla seems like she's a little bit smarter, more clever, and the Sybil system might not like that. But then you get this episode where Camilla is basically just advocating for the Sybil system to maintain control of the country. And it's like, oh no, she's the poster child. She's the one Sybil system would want because she's going to just go with the flow and do whatever's best for the system. And Sybil system could take advantage of that. I don't know. I don't know if Sybil system's going to show themselves to Camilla, or if Sybil system is going to get a little bit jealous that there's Macarena, which is this new AI that could rival it. I don't know if Bifrost is planning to see what occurs with Sybil system and Macarena. We're going to talk about it as we go through. But yeah, this new generation of artificial intelligence, mass control AI with a hologram generator. That is also terrifying because it's like, we as a society, you have this beautiful pop idol. She's pretty, she's smart, she says all the right things. As long as she maintains this appearance, society is going to go with her. And I'm like, yeah, we, look at celebrity culture and how much we value how people look and how they present themselves. I mean, look at political debates where it mattered what the candidate looked like. Not what they said, but how they presented themselves. And we've seen that throughout history too. So it's terrifying, the idea of a mass control AI, but it exists now and it's terrifying, right? It's very scary. So yeah, the Macarena. Yep, so there's Karina, Camilla, and Macarena. And they're one and the same. They're both side by side. And the doctor was trying to protect the AI he created, but Karina took it from him. So I find it interesting that Karina, using the AI, the doctor was kind of just obsessed with the AI and wanting to like protect it and hold on to it like it's his own kid. Again, we've talked a lot about father figures in this series so far. And the idea of Tsuchiya being a father. His daughter was murdered. And so the AI he created kind of became like the surrogate daughter, but it's artificial intelligence. It gained a consciousness of its own and it no longer wanted to be contained by its creator anymore. And so that led to the whole incident with him. So that getting explained makes sense. Also, it is not lost on me that you have this little gemstone, this little ball of Macarena confined with these little bands and everything in this necklace that is a sphere that is also the same as the Bifrost sphere and the diagrams and the spheres that Akusawa has as well. It's not lost to me that they're very similar, so I'm curious if we're going to get a connection between them as we go forward. But yeah, that whole scene where they both come together and they're both in sync. So yeah, the transport company was linked to Inamiya, who is sloppy. They don't cover their tracks very well. And they're going to the arena where there's all this political stuff happening. And they say Bando and Seo from Division 2 are on the scene. So I think we've met Seo from Division 2. I feel like we've met them, maybe. And Bando, I don't remember Bando, but I think we've met Seo from Division 2 before. Were they in charge, maybe? I feel like we've met them in Season 2, so maybe. I love that Kay was just like, look, I'm just showing up as a civilian going to a debate. If I happen to get involved, I don't know. And what I like about it is that him and Shindo, they work together so well, and they're usually in sync and informing each other of everything that happens. But sometimes they do things where each other doesn't exactly know about it, and they're like, oh, he's doing that. But they both have faith and trust in each other that it's going to work out, which is really nice. I like that. I like that quite a bit. I will talk about this more with Shindo and Kay. I think it is very interesting that Sybil System and Mika let Kay off of his suspension, like, right as this whole thing was going on. Obviously, that was intentional. I feel like Kasai... I'm very curious about Kasai at this point in the season, because I thought, with all this going on, Kasai would be freaked out. I thought the Sybil System would be freaked out that something is targeting them, but they're handling this cool as a cucumber. They're like, nope, we got this. We're fine. And I don't know if it's because Miyano Mamoru's character, we saw them interact with Kasai back during the first Sinners in the System movie. They were there interacting with Kasai. I wonder if Kasai has planted Miyano Mamoru's character into the Bifrost thing to learn about what they're doing to destroy Bifrost from within. I'm wondering if that's why they're there, if that's what they're doing. And that would tie back to the dad telling Miyano Mamoru's character, whose name is escaping me at this point. Is it Homura? I think it's Homura. Telling him to, like, win no matter what, even if it destroys you. Being like, if Sybil System's using you as a weapon to destroy Bifrost, win. Do whatever you have to survive. Maybe that's connected to it. But I feel like it would make sense for Homura to be the spy for Sybil System inside the Bifrost system, because otherwise they're not free. Like, why else would they freak out? And then she talks about flushing out the foxes at the end of this episode, being like, okay, we're identifying the foxes now. We know we have Akasawa. We had Inomiya, who's dead now. Sugasawa is captured, so they're out of the picture. So they're like, we're slowly flushing these foxes out over and over again. And I like how Kasai phrases it to Mika at the end of the episode. She's like, are these a challenger, or are they just a bug in the system? And if they're just a bug, then we just put a patch in. We just get that out. Rid that bug from the system. But if it's a challenge, then we have to step. So Kasai is being very cautious at this point. The Sybil System is being cautious and trying to figure out, what do we need to do to be on top? So is this going to be something we have to devote a lot of time and energy into, or are we going to be able to just slap a patch on it and move on? How serious is the threat that Bifrost is bringing? Right? Okay. So they talk about this debate, and Shindo tries to tell Kamiya that she will possibly be in danger, but Kamiya's like, I'm not backing down. Inomiya is going to try to expose you. And Kamiya does not seem worried. She's like, nope, I'm not affording to lose. I'm not going to quit. And I feel like Shindo likes Kamiya. They're both mentalists in a sense. Or is she? Or was it Macarena? That's kind of the thing too. Is Kamiya a mentalist herself? Or is the reason he's been kind of bamboozled about her is because she has the eye working alongside her, and that's what makes it, hard for him to, crack what she's all about. I don't know. I want to root for Shindo and Kamiya after this episode. I kind of want to ship them together, these two mentalists that are, okay, here's the vibe that they give me, right? The vibe that Shindo and Kamiya give me after this episode, especially in the scene where they're alone on the dock together, if you've watched Attack on Titan, it gives me Annie and Armin vibes. Shindo gives me Armin vibes, hardcore. And when she's talking about, this is in season 1 of Attack on Titan, so it's brought up the idea of, like, the good girl. Am I good or am I evil? And she's like, I think I'm kind of evil for what I'm doing, because I know I'm manipulating the public. I know that I'm doing this to get my way. I know that I've hurt people along the way doing it, but I'm still moving forward because it's in my best interest too. And I like Shindo saying, well, I kind of like people to have some evil in them. And I'm like, ah! So again, I feel like I want to ship Shindo and Kamiya because he likes himself a Slytherin. But also, I feel like that's another tie to Akane, Shindo and Akane. Shindo's being like, well, I like people that have a little bad boy in them, got a little evil in them. And Akane, she likes herself a bad boy. So I'm like, I see the connection and I like it a lot. But I feel like Shindo likes people that have some evil in them because it's a sign that you're human. It's a sign that you are relatable, right? Shindo has some darkness deep down inside of him, and so does Kei. So I feel like that's why they work together really well, because they both are aware of that fact. So it is what it is. So then, yep, we get the transport. We're not breaking out the Budweiser. Instead, we're breaking out these guys that are going to try to expose the AI. And then we have a group. My only issue at this point in the series, and I'm very curious about it, we'll see as it goes, but I want to make note because I want you all to know that I'm aware of this, is that Kisaragi has done practically nothing the last couple episodes. She's just been there. And that's okay. I don't know if it's because they are saving a twist with Kisaragi because she has one of the Fox cards. Timma gave his Fox card to Shindo and Kei. Kisaragi did not give her card to them that we know of. And Hinakawa has noticed that. So it is not lost to me when that happened. So I feel like we're going to either come back to her at some point and she's going to be like part of a twist. I don't know. Or it's the fact that, unfortunately for Kisaragi, Kunazuka is doing essentially what she could have done, and Kunazuka has more notoriety and she's more badass. So I'm just curious what they're going to do with Kisaragi's character, because at this point it doesn't feel like she even needs to be there. She's kind of superfluous, but I'm curious if we're going to tie back to her. I feel like the show is setting up where there's lots of little pieces and they want you to know about them, but then they want you to forget about them. Like, don't worry about that. And I feel like then they're going to bring it back and it's going to be like, oh, and a big twist. So we'll see. Also, poor Eerie this episode. I love the idea and the little tidbit that Eerie is very political minded. He likes politics. He's very invested in them because of his sense of community and how they affect the people around him. And so when they get in the helicopter, he's the one looking at the polls, talking about them tipping in Komiya's favor. He's the one checking all the political results, which explains why when they have the election result party, he's the one getting drunk because he's like, I can't vote. I'm an enforcer, so damn it. Also interesting to note, enforcers can't vote, but that makes sense. They're latent criminals. They don't let criminals vote, what have you. But I do feel bad for Eerie because not only does he have to fight his friends from the abandoned zone, but he also like gets shown up by a 24-year-old Spider-Man and he doesn't get to vote. So poor Eerie. I feel for him. I feel like Eerie gets a little bit of a short end of a stick in this episode. He can't help it. So Timma is interesting. Timma talking about like an AI speechwriter. Is that what this is? And Shindo's like, no, it's neuroscience. It's a new mental control system applying decision-making and cognitive psychology. And he talks about how humans don't like making decisions. We're very indecisive. We're not very good at thinking for ourselves. We're very much like a herd mentality. And I like that Erie's like, explain this in layman's terms. And he's like, we like it when other people will make decisions for us, right? Typically. Not everybody's like that, but a lot of people do. So again, tying to our own culture, sign of the times. This series makes me want to go out and read like 10 encyclopedias so that I can make my own decisions. This series makes me want to like be inspired to make my own decisions, think for myself, do research. I love that about Psycho-Pass. It makes me want to feel empowered to be independent and make my own decisions. I absolutely love that. As I have polls on my channel where you make decisions for me. What can we do, right? What can we do? So, in any case, poor Kei. Kei decides to get involved and show up. And Kei was a one-man wrecking ball. A one-man wrecking crew this whole episode. Shindo had his moment. So did Timma. So did Eerie. But MVP for Kei, who just basically, like, Sir Lancelot fought his way Monty Python style through everyone in this episode. He was just like, the Black Knight music was playing and he was just going through the crowds, just beating up everybody left and right. Like, Kei put in some work this episode and it was kind of insane. I also really like the way that this whole candidates on stage part was set up. I think it's interesting that a large portion of the crowd were holograms. That part is interesting. Again, tying to like our political climate where people Photoshop or say that there's crowds there that weren't there. I think back to there was like an inauguration, I think, was it I don't know if this is 2016 inauguration, but there was like photoshopped images in the US of like how many people actually showed up. And if you've worked with Photoshop, like I have, you kind of can tell. And I was like, ooh, that's interesting. And now we have AI generated imagery, which makes things even more complicated. So it's like, I don't know about this. What can we do? It's weird. As AI gets more and more complex and perfected, it's presenting a lot of very rapidly developing changes in our world, which are important to know about and to be able to identify. Because if you can identify it, you can figure out for yourself what's real and what's not real. And that can become very hard at times. But yeah, I like the symbolism this. I love the symbolism of Yuju Shiki as the flame and of her as the water, right? The cool, refreshing drink. Although Yukishiji doing like the peck chest bump was like, it was a lot. And then her showing up like Sailor Mercury there, like an angel and a demon, right? And supposedly the angel won, even though deep down she may be more the demon than he was. I love that dynamic of he seems like this demon devil, like pro athlete wrestler, but at the end of the day, he's kind of like a big softie and kind of unawares of everything. And she seems like the angel, the angelic one, but she's kind of demonic because she's the one that knows she's manipulating the system. Oh, the dynamic is so good. It's so good. I love myself it. Yes. So in any case, they get there to the site. We see Inomiya just laying back, enjoying the show. I'm so sad Inomiya is dead. We only get them for 2 episodes. I'm glad they were the thumbnail last week because I debated on it. I debated making them the thumbnail or making Kay the thumbnail for last week's episode, but I was like, no, Inomiya is such a cool character to get introduced. I want to show them off, and now they're dead. So glad I did that. So, but yeah, Kay just battling everybody. I like that we had her on the white side, him on the green side, bathed in the different beams of light. There's like the announcer in the middle with like the cross in between them. Lots of really good symbolic visuals, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, her AI getting exposed. Here's the crazy thing. I thought with Kamiya and the AI getting exposed that it was going to ruin her. I thought that was going to tip the scales in Yukishiji's favor because they were going to realize, oh, we've been manipulated by this AI and it's not really her that's talking, it's a mouthpiece. What? Like what do you mean? But that's not what happens. And I feel like Sinners in the System kind of foreshadowed this moment, thinking back on it, because the second Sinners in the System, where it was Kogami's story and it was talking about Kogami, and like at the very end in the end credits, he like watches the election happening. And even though they took out the dictator and they let it be an electoral decision, whether you want to bring the dictator back or vote for somebody else, they brought the dictator back, or at least it seemed like they were going to. And Kogami was like, son of a bitch. Like, just like I let y'all make a decision and you still vote for them. That was so interesting to me because it was like showing that even at the end of the day, people rather would support they would rather support the persona that seems in their best interest than the avatar that's controlling it. Even if they know they're being controlled, if it's in their best interest, they supported it, which again aligns with Sybil system. Like, people being okay with Sybil system because it creates this great environment. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. And we don't want to know how the sausage is made. Let's just let us be in a peaceful existence. If the majority are thriving and in a peaceful existence, then they're okay being governed by a manipulative body. But it's when the minority becomes the majority and there's a problem that you're going to get people rising up. So just complacency. That's what it is. It's like they're like, yeah, this AI was maybe being manipulative, but we're all going to be okay by the end of it if we support it. With Yukishiji, it was too much of the unknown. And people weren't willing to take a gamble on it possibly being different, if better, than to settle for something that appeases them and allows that complacency. And if that's not on the nose with a lot of our political discord now, I don't know what is. So I'm just really surprised that she ended up it just backfired. Inomiya's plan did not work. Also, want to make note that when they have everybody gathered, like to go down and take them down, I love that Kunazuka just looks so badass. She looks like she's about to do her own stunts in a movie, which she does. But also, I want to make note, when Shindo separated from Kei, I was really interested to see how Shindo would take charge, because Shindo, when Kei is around, Kei is like the take charge person. He's the one with like the Ganoza demeanor to be like, yes, let's do this, this, and this. And Shindo just kind of like bounces around and follows him like, sure, let's go, buddy, old pal. So when they're separated, I was curious how Shindo was going to react, but he handles everything really professionally. He goes into like a Akane mode. And he's like, okay, Hound 1, Hound 2, I'm Shepherd 2. Let's go to this. He uses the professional terminology. He keeps everything like succinct. He shows he's a respectable leader, even though he's like this 24-year-old kid. So that was really, really impressive to me. I thought that was handled really, really well. So yeah, they try to get her to apologize in the back room and to like make a public statement, but she's like, I'm not going to do that. She's like, because no, that's my whole point here, is to serve the people. I'm not going to say what I'm doing is wrong. The one woman that's the immigrant secretary that helps her get out of the way and helps her get out of this, one, I think she likes Kamiya too. So Shindo, you may have competition. I don't know if you've noticed this, but there are a lot of blonde lesbians in this series that seem to get the ladies of their choice. So, Mika, you should be happy. Things will work out for you and Frederica. Shion and Kunozuka are fine. And it seems like this woman here that's with Kamiya, Shindo, you may have competition. I'm just saying. But I really thought that she'd have more of a part in this as well. So I'm curious if she will end up having more of a part, especially when we found out that she's an immigrant. So I'm going to be curious where her storyline goes, if anywhere, because now it seems more like Kamiya and Shindo having a storyline, which is fascinating. But damn, yeah, I like that everybody getting out of there and the broadcast still playing. Kisaragi notes the broadcast still running, but it doesn't seem to affect anything. It seems to work out exactly like they wanted it to. So that's interesting. But yeah, so they go to stop the broadcast to go take care of things. I like Tenma. I can see some people complaining that Tenma gets beat around a lot. Look, Tenma's an older guy, right? I appreciate the show being a little bit more realistic in that Tenma is not like foolproof. He's an older man. He's kind of like Masaoka, but I mean, we know Masaoka worked out. We don't know if Tenma works out. He seems to drink more than anything. So that all makes sense. Also, I am willing to give Shindo the protagonist OP pass because Kogami's got it and Genoza's got it too. Kogami and Genoza get away with anything, so let's let Shindo get away with everything too, right? And Kei, the fight scenes in this episode were really well done. I thought that the choreography with the fights throughout all this were great. There was even a knife fight. There was a knife fight. Oh my god, we can't have a Psycho-Pass episode without a knife fight. Only it was like the combat robot using the knife. Yeah, it was. Great. And then we even had, Inomiya tried to do a knife fight with Akasawa. So yeah, Psycho-Pass episode with knife fights. Why are we not surprised? That was really funny. Yes. But yeah, I thought the choreography with Kunozuka and Tenma versus the goons in the control room, that was all amazing. The choreography between Oishi's and Irie's fight was great. Shindo, oh my god. Shindo, we'll talk about that scene when we get to it. And then Kei's whole choreography with his fight scenes. Like, this series being like just a combat psychological thriller, I'm here for it. I also like that Kei immediately like asks who Kunozuka is. It's explained. He's like, oh, okay, cool. And then Shion is like, hey, can you guys go so Kunozuka and I can like work together? I just imagine Kunozuka's like, get them out of there so we can sweet talk each other. Please, go, boys. We don't need you. Love it. So yeah. And then we have Tenma's conversation with Kei in the elevator. Did Sybil partner you with Shindo? And Kei says, no. Our compatibility results did not recommend it. It recommended the opposite, that we should not work together. And he says, are you ignoring Sybil's judgment then? And he goes, no. He's like, I trust Sybil, but the system isn't everything. So I feel like that's what comes back to play at the end of all of this, is that with Shindo and Kei, they're kind of like Akane in the sense that they do trust Sybil, but it's more than a system, right? It is the people involved as well. which is so interesting because it ties to what Akane was saying about how the people control the laws don't control people. They're kind of saying the same thing. It also suggests that that's why Shindo is okay with Komiya, because he understands the system Komiya is backing, but he also believes that Komiya will be the driving force using the AI. So the AI can't, as we see in this episode, the AI right now cannot function without Komiya. So he's like, even though this AI is manipulative, you're the one at the helm making the ultimate decisions, so I can still trust it because I know the system is in your hands. And that, yes, we trust the system, but we're the ones controlling it at the end of the day. And that is somewhat of an encouraging message, because you could take a lot of what's proposed in this episode and be like, oh shit, our government's manipulating us. We're not going to be able to we're destroying critical thinking and creative thought. That's a problem. You could definitely look at this episode as being very negative, but I think that Kei and Shindo have sort of a positive spin on it, where they're like, yes, we know the system. We understand the system. So because we understand the system, we're able to function within it. I think that's the big thing. I think that a lot of people, and people I talk to, they fear that because you know that you're being manipulated, there's nothing you can do. And that's not really it. It's like, knowing is half the battle. If you know what system you're working with, you can navigate within it and you can find ways to make it work for you. And that's kind of what Kei and Shindo are doing. So it kind of gives a positive spin on it, oddly enough. And Timma's just kind of like, okay, I don't quite understand. But I feel like Timma respects Kei because of what he says with Shindo, because he gives him the baton. He's like, you don't have a dominator, so here, you take my weapon. I got a dominator. We're good. That was so sweet. I loved that moment. I loved that moment between them. That was really, really nice. So yeah, so then they managed to go the route to find Komiya. And then I love that Shindo just takes off doing Spider-Man moves, and Erie's like, are you freaking kidding? I love Erie's like, I can't do that. I'm not doing that. Shindo is a force of nature, and he is a force to be reckoned with. And there are moments where I think Shindo's Spider-Man abilities are a little slightly bit OP, but then I have to remind myself, Romania, you've been simping over Ganoza and Kogami, who've done pretty rare feats of physical activity in the last season and a half. So, I mean, should you say anything? But Shindo pushes the bar. Shindo is pushing that barrier a little bit. Shindo gives me Kamui vibes from season 2 sometimes, because Kamui would do things that I'm like, that's not quite jumping the shark, but it's getting awfully close, but it managed to stay reined in. Shindo is the same thing. Shindo is doing like gymnastic Olympic level moves that I'm like, okay, you're 24. Your body is still completely fine. Whatever. If Masaoka did it, I'd question it because of his age, but I'll give you a pass, Shindo, because you are, I mean, and look at what Makishima did. I mean, what can we do? We can't give, one person a pass and the other person not a pass. Sure. But yeah, okay. So it said, since this one guy, Oishi said, since you started sharing the Abandoned Zones information network with Tsunemori, he says, something hasn't been right. Don't you agree? And that's when he goes, yeah, what does it matter now? So Eri knows Tsunemori. He knows Akane. He's been sharing information with Akane, which is fascinating to me because he gives Mika credit later on. But Mika's like, hey, I just picked you up out of the zone because that was Akane's deal. It's not just me. You can give me credit, but it was really Akane. So the fact of the matter is Akane picked him up out of the zone and sent him to work with Mika. And he's been gaining access and information about the zone since then because of Akane's work. Okay. Give us that little crumb of mystery about Akane, right? We'll talk about her and Kasai here at the end of the episode. I am glad that Eri saved Oishi's life, because Oishi was going to get shot with the Dominator, and Eri's like, no, I got this. You go on, Shindo. I'm going to take care of him. And he saves him. He's like, I beat you up, but you could have died to the Dominator. Consider yourself lucky. Eri's such a good guy. I love him. And Suabi voicing him is such a treat, right? So then Shindo faces this robot, right? And he grabs her. Arm strength. Everybody, that is the one thing that always gets me in anime and in movies in general, is when people grab one-armed, like somebody one-armed, and dangle their dead weight. She probably weighs like 120 pounds, 130 pounds. Grabbing it with one arm is hard, y'all. It's a bit, right? That's probably the most unrealistic thing about this episode, is him holding her up with one arm is probably the most unrealistic thing. But my thing is, whenever he goes, "Do you trust me?" I was like, that feels like an Disney's Aladdin move. And she's like, "No." I'm like, girl gives the best answer. She's like, "No, I don't trust you." And he's like, "Good, bye." And he swings her over and catches her. Like, that move was insane. And it works out. Poor guy is like exhausted. And then I really like the shot where Timma and Kay like confront the robot and he throws the grate at the screen and it hits the camera. That part was really good. The perspective on that was awesome. And then again, taking on from Sinners in the System, we have them fighting the robot and they manage to like take him on just like Sugo did with his. Fun times. So yeah, this battle, the choreography, everything about it. I'm glad that Kay and Timma got some first aid after this, because I did not like seeing this like knife wielding robot like slash through Kay. I didn't like seeing that at all. I was like, nope. Seeing blood spatter. I feel like every episode we have to have the Dominator showing somebody blowing up, which is still gross. But seeing like just the knife swipes, no sir, no ma'am. I don't like that at all. No thank you. So yeah. And then Shindo, whenever he's like confronted by Kunozuka, she's like, "Are you okay? You look like you've been through hell." He's like, "I'm totally fine." And then he passes out. Yeah, I feel like poor Shindo, he passes out all the time. Bless his heart. So then, yeah, they try to take in Heracles, our Yukishiji. They kind of mentioned like he'll basically be, how'd they phrase it? That he'll be put behind bars or institutionalized if his hue doesn't clear up. Is it bad that I kind of would like Yukishiji to become an enforcer? Is that bad? I'd be kind of about that. Like this big, huge man being an enforcer. I'd be all about that. But he might be institutionalized. Which again, Kamiya, because she's a mentalist, is able to keep her hue from being clouded. I think that had a lot to do with the polling as well. The fact that Yukishiji, his hue, he had to be taken into custody and his hue was starting to get clouded. I think that definitely influenced people not voting for him versus Komiya, who seems perfectly fine. They're like, "Oh, well, this all happened to her, but her hue's not clouded, so that must mean she's still a good person. So let's vote for her." I feel like that had a big thing to do with it, right? And then good for Timma for staying up. Good for Timma for standing up to his brother and his dad and saying, "Don't tell me about enforcement." He's like, when you couldn't protect your parent or your candidate, and like shoved him away. And the dad's like, "What are you talking about?" And I love that because we had that flashback with Timma, he's like, his dad wasn't around when his half brother was an asshole. So I'm glad that he got to get back at him and like kind of have the last say there. That was really good. Good for Timma. And so they take him in. But that mark, Haruki Inomiya, where they find the card. Interesting. The whole scene where that perspective of Inomiya trying to I'm going to take a screenshot of it right now, trying to leave the scene with the suitcase full of gold dragging behind them. That perspective, everything about this confrontation with Akasawa was so well done. Like the fact that there's like the dead trees, it looks like a thing from like Resident Evil. It's creepy. Like the fact that he was trying to get away, and Omiya was, and Akasawa. Akasawa is kind of scary because they always have a smile on their face, like a fox. And they come across just being like, "Look, Inomiya, I'm trying to warn you. Make these good decisions and you'll live." And Inomiya just makes the worst choices. One, they attack Akasawa, which was red flag bad decision number one. Two, they got to the elevator. They didn't choose the stairs. I'm like, no, don't choose an elevator. No, elevators kind of freak me out in general. When I was on my trip earlier in April, we were at a hotel and I was in an elevator and I was luckily with a bunch of elevator engineers. what are the odds? But we were going down, and here's the long story short. My roommate and I, at our national tournament that I was competing at with my team, our room had a toilet blockage. Wasn't my fault. Had a toilet malfunction, and so I really had to use the bathroom, and we couldn't use the toilet. And so I was like, hey, I'm gonna run down to the public restroom on the second floor. I'll be right back. So I get in the elevator. There's a bunch of elevator engineers in there. We're going down. I really have to use the bathroom. We're going down, and all of a sudden the elevator just stops working. And I was like, and luckily the engineers are like, oh, there's something wrong with this elevator. And I was like, oh, is there? And they're like, yeah. They're like, we may have to like shut the elevator down and work on this. And I kid you not, y'all. I thought in that moment, this is it. This is the moment that I defecate myself in public. I was like, this is the moment I poop my pants in public in front of these grown-ass men because I have to use the bathroom so bad. I was like, and luckily, they undid the panel, made the elevator do something weird. It like rose up and down a minute, and I was like, huh. And then it just happened to stop on the second floor, and I jumped out of the elevator. I was like, thanks, guys. Have fun. Good luck fixing it. Sorry you all had to hear that too much information story from Romania Black, but ever since then, I've been very wary of elevators, and I've been like, I'm going to take the stairs ever since then. So I was like, Inomia, don't you do it. But the thing about it is like, if you make the right choice from now on, you'll survive. And again, there is this very interesting notion about choices and the results. The question, of course, is, do we have free will? And of course, that's been a constant question in several series I've been watching, is that like our choices give us results. But it seemed to me from the moment Inomiya was confronted by Akasawa that they were going to die, that Akasawa had decided they were going to die, but they presented it saying like, you can live if you make right choices. I'm like, what is this, Saul? But these bad choices are not made. Like first of all, he's like, don't tell me. And he's like doing these fake moves and everything. And Inomiya makes the bad decision. Like Akasawa provokes Inomiya, like with the whole fake moves. Like they provoked Inomiya to like make a move and take a swing. But Inomiya made the first punch. They made the mistake of doing the punch, right? And then he was like, ow, that hurt. He's kind of masochistic, Akasawa is. And they have this fight. I do love Inomiya in the white suit and Akasawa in the black suit. Again, that duality. The dead trees all around them. Oh, so good. Such a great atmosphere for a fight. And then Akasawa just beats the shit out of Inomiya, and they run away after he throws the knife. And then they get to the elevator and they make the decision. You had the elevator with light and you had the stairs of darkness. I was getting Death Parade vibes all across this scene. I was like, don't get in that elevator. No, sir. But they do, and it stops. And he's like, the Bifrost had determined Komiya's victory in advance. And like, you were just a sacrificial card. Your interference ended up hurting Yakushiji even more than you know. It's basically your fault. That was the plan. You thought you were helping, but you were hurting. And yeah, they were used. You can lament your own stupidity. Yep, and then sends them. Azusawa. I keep calling Akusawa Azusawa. Yeah. And then that phrase where he says, you are neither pretty nor nice. Being like, you didn't have finesse, you didn't do things the right way, and you didn't have a good heart in the situation. Oof. So anyway, Mika's like, no, there's no suspension, everything's great. Like, that was a close call. And then they said, now, I think the choice of wording here is interesting, where Mika, they say Chief Shimotsuki is a scheming fox. I feel like that wording is intentional. Now, Kasai seems to have this idea. We're going to put Kasai up here. The idea of Mika basically outing Bifrost and to try to weed out the foxes. Which you can make the idea that you have to become the idea of you have to be a monster to fight monsters. So just to out the fox, you have to be a fox, right? You could go that route. I think it's interesting that if she's described as a fox, she's using hounds to weed out the foxes. You can take that metaphor however you want to, but I think that's interesting. So then we have our election party. Everybody's sitting there eating pizza, drinking beer. There's the election results. I like that Shion has her little glass of wine and she's with Shion there. Super cute that they have their own little viewing party. They're just off by themselves. Super cute. They're going to like make out in 10 minutes and everybody else is going to be distracted. It's nice. You've worked hard to return to society. Oh, I just love them there. It's so cute. So yeah, they're talking about the election being nearly over. I like that they have like, I love that they have what's on the table there. There is pizza. There is fries. There looks like there's a giant rump roast. There's a damn salad. There's a whole spread. There's a spread. And then it looks like, I mean, oh my God. Eerie is so drunk. His like whole body is red. It looks like, I think that Kunazuka and Temma are not drinking. And then it looks like there's a glass of champagne for Kisaragi, and then Shindo's not drinking either. And he's got his little arm in a sling. His little arm's hurt there. And he asks if he voted, and Shindo's like, yes, but I'm not going to say who I voted for. And I love that Erie's like, why can't you just tell me? Tell me who you voted for. I want to know. I'm curious to know who Kei voted for. I feel like Kei voted for Yakushiji. I feel like Kei voted for Yakushiji because of the whole immigrant thing. But again, I kind of like what the show is proposing as well. The idea that Shindo and Kei are from opposite ends of the spectrum. They have different beliefs, but they support each other in making the world around them better. And I'm like, if that's not a bipartisan effort, what is, right? Because they seem like they're just like two bipartisan figures working together towards a common cause, which I can stand behind and get all over. I like it. So yeah, poor Eerie. And Shindo's like, it's okay, man. And then we find out that Komiya ends up winning. I like that you see his hand like pushing Eerie back, but he's trying to be polite too. And it says here, she has 5% lead in the votes. It's 52 to 47%. But then they factor in this thing where they're like factoring in the hue correction. They're like, she's over 71%. I'm like, hue correction being a factor. How about it? And then, yeah, he'll receive isolated counseling and intensive care. But if his crime coefficient stays high after that, then they're like, he'll be institutionalized. So, yeah, and they're like, how should I put it? And they talk about how Yakushi was doped up to be the ideal athlete. And Karina Komiya wanted to win at any cost. So in the end, maybe the one most in line with Sybil is Macarena, the AI. Relegate yourself to an external entity and your body becomes the avatar. Yeah, basically your body is just the presence. It's the AI that's in control. What's fascinating about this is that Sybil's system, they seem to want Kamiya to win, but then again, so technically does Sybil. So they both seem to be in line with the same beliefs. So I'm curious why Bifrost wanted Kamiya to win if she's the one that Sybil would want if they're trying to take down Sybil. Because it seems like Bifrost is trying to act against Sybil. So there's still some stuff that's not quite lining up yet. And I'm curious to see where it goes. But yeah, interestingly enough. And then they say there, that way of thinking might find favor these days. Even so, the system isn't everything. And their little cheers at that moment. I like that they clink their glasses and cheers at that. And that's really cute. And everybody else is just kind of like, what are these guys talking about? So yeah, the system isn't everything. It's how you work within it. Meanwhile, I like that Mika is considering going into the election party and this cursed image of Eerie coming behind her to like come up after her. Again, I feel like Eerie tries to get on her good side, but I'm like, dude, she is not interested. And I kind of, you know what? Mika won me over this episode because she's like, won't I be a wet blanket if I go to this thing? I'm like, Mika, you will not. I kind of, you know what? I gave Mika such a hard time in season 2, but she's kind of winning me over a little bit, coming into her own, growing up. And she's like, so you are nervous around me. Without you, I'd be rotting in an abandoned zone. And she's like, I just took over an information network. That was Akane's mission. Again, I feel like Mika is supporting Akane from the sidelines. We just don't know the full story of what's happened. And funny that we transition from Akane right over to the Bifrost. So then they say, I want to take note of whatever they're saying. They're saying merely leading Komiya to victory is not the true intent of round robin. So we have Sybil and we have round robin. The Bifrost is the network, but I feel like Bifrost is the network just like Sybil is the network. And I feel like we also have Kasai, or not here Kasai, we have round robin, which is kind of the voice of Bifrost, and we have Kasai, which is the voice of Sybil. Now, here's where I feel like I have to dissect everything that's said here. It's like leading Komiya to victory is not the true intent of round robin. This was not their overall overarching goal. Instead, the issue was making the public aware of her proxy personality AI and creating a situation that Sybil could not ignore. So what we have here, basically, if we come over here, that Komiya is just a means to an end. What they wanted was for Sybil to be aware of the personality proxy AI and to see how it will respond. So what's interesting is it seems like Bifrost is trying to flush Sybil out into the open, and Sybil is trying to flush Bifrost out into the open. So they both are trying to flush each other out from the shadows to see who's going to be able to be exposed first. And this whole deal with Komiya's AI being exposed was like a representation of that, like a small little layer of representation of that going on. It's essential to our security. So they're like, we need to flush out Sybil's system to make sure that we're safe, because if we flush them out, we can find them and harm them. So we had to do this and had to let Komiya win for that to be a thing to happen. Although Kyoko curbing Inomiya early on was rather unfortunate. I'm watching a lot of series with lots of Kyokos. None of them are great. So, interesting. None of them have great personalities. But yeah, curbing Inomiya early on was rather unfortunate. So then they're like, I'm shocked you lost all your past winnings. So it feels like they made a gamble on whether or not Azusawa would end Inomiya this early, and they did. So they lost their winnings because of it. You could drop low enough to face enforcement. I don't know what that means. Why do you face enforcement dropping low enough? I feel like with latent criminals, your crime coefficient has to rise high enough to face enforcement. But here in Bifrost, if it lowers enough, you face enforcement. What? Like, I hate to see you go out like this, Shizuka. And Shizuka's the one that Miyano Mamoru plays, correct? So I feel like Miyano Mamoru made the wager to get Komiya to win the election. And Bifrost wanted that because it would help expose Sybil. But again, if Miyano Mamoru's character Homura is working for the Sybil system, then this is all just to go with the program until Bifrost makes a mistake and they are exposed. Or we're basically relying on whose hounds are the best, whose inspectors are the best. Is Azusawa going to be the inspector for Bifrost that succeeds, or are Shindo and Kei, the inspectors for Sybil, going to be the ones that succeed? That's where we're at in this game of chess, right? And again, you talk about personality proctors for the avatars. It's like Azusawa is the personality proctor for Bifrost, and the inspectors Kei and Shindo are the personality proctors for Sybil. It's just a game within a game, right? I do love, speaking of game within a game, symbolisms within symbolisms, the Ferris wheel that has red and blue and purple tones. Because we have that red and blue, that bipartisan that comes together to create purple. And that's what we see with Komiya and Shindo. I really liked this scene where he talks with her. I like the idea of her coming out in disguise. And then they confirm everything with Tsuchiya. They talk about, independent personalities and children. Again, we have this whole father-son dynamic between Shindo and his dad. Is Shindo different than his dad? We have the idea of Tsuchiya and the AI being his daughter. We have the idea of Genoza and his father, with Tema and his father. There's a lot of children and parents being brought up in this series, and are they connected or can they be independent of one another, right? So then they talk about the helmet riots 7 years ago. Yeah, season 1, 7 years ago. The helmet riots with Mikishima. Mikishima's influence causing this ripple effect where the helmet riots, getting his daughter killed, spurred Tsuchiya to make this technology. Yeah, that idea, right? The concept of violence and self-interest and the ripple effect that it causes. That's just so crazy. I love it. Mm-hmm. He pursued research hoping that would never happen again. And it hasn't. Amazingly. And then we support its work, and that's how I came to use it. So the doctor's research was to make tools to heal himself. And you all are accomplices in him trying to heal himself. And I like the idea that the concept of this being he was trying to, you all were trying to help him, and you didn't kill him. It was a byproduct of everything going on. You didn't wish for the doctor's death. I love that shot of her with the rain and everything around her and the colors. Oh, it's such a good point. Now, the idea where he says you want to make politics fun, like a TV show. There is I see what she's trying to do there to be likable. And what does he say to it? I want to see what he says to that. There, where she's like, those were Macarina's words, by the way. He says, TV shows come in all genres, just steer clear of thrillers or horror. She's like, politics needs thrills too. There is some funniness, some humor to this moment of oh, we're going to make this like a TV show or like a fun game. But I think that it is steering, Shindo kind of points out the cold irony of that, being yeah, you want to make this like a TV show and fun, but the actions you're taking through politics have real consequences, and for some people they will become horrors. You think it's gonna be this fun little comedy TV show, but the actions you're taking have serious consequences. They affect people in ways that could kill them. So you can't just say, we're just going to make politics fun. It's the actions and decisions you're making are affecting people's lives. You can't treat it like a game. And I think Shindo, because he's such an optimistic, fun person, he kind of beats around the bush. He tries to present that to her, the way he's saying that, being yeah, And he says the Roman poet Juvenalis, what does he say there? How do you say it? I'm not familiar with his work. Juvenalis satirized the rulers of his time, saying they blinded the citizens with bread and circuses. Yeah. Welcome to modern day politics. We're going to, let them eat cake. We're going to have parties and be lavish and throw these fanfares and make it like a celebrity event. And underneath the guise, the public won't realize the atrocities that are being done, while the facade of the circus and the bread and the parties and the lavish affairs are hiding that. And Shindo's pointing that out, right? Saying, are you suggesting doing the same thing? And she's like, well, what's wrong with that? As long as there's peace. And that is the big question. She's like, what's wrong with the circus? As long as everyone's living a good life because of it. That's the Sybil system. It's yeah, you're being manipulated and controlled, and there's stuff happening behind the scenes you don't know about. In season 1, when the Sybil system was yeah, we're killing people that are a threat, but you don't need to know that. It's not affecting you. And her saying, what's wrong with it being a circus if there's peace? That's the big question, right? Should there be transparency all the time? it's bringing about these big questions. She's like, it's not like everyone wants to keep their eyes open. Yeah, that's the problem. Not everybody wants to be, aware of it all the time. But then she says, she pauses, and she's like, do you think I'm a good person or an evil one? And Shindo's like, what do you think? And she says, I'm an evil person. Yeah. She's like, a lot of people have been ruined because of me. She's like, everything I'm doing, I say it, but I've ruined people's lives. Doesn't that make me evil? And he's like, you just refuse to lose. I kind of like people who call themselves evil. And that's such an interesting thing there, where he talks to her about that, saying that you didn't want to lose. You wanted to win. You were willing to do whatever it took to win. And you were able to admit it. I like that he doesn't say, I like people who are evil. He's like, I like people who call themselves evil, who understand why they're doing the things that they're doing and the reasons behind it. Which is fascinating. I think that Shindo and Mikishima would get along. I think they would. I think Mikishima would be like, you can join the book club. I'm cool with you. But I don't know if Shindo would eat Madeleines or not. And he's like, I'm glad I voted for you. Mm-hmm. Interesting. And them kind of leaning inward towards each other, showing that they're of similar like mind. So yeah, I think that that's going to be important to note for future episodes, that Shindo says he's willing to do whatever it takes. He's like, you just didn't want to lose, so you're willing to do whatever it takes to win. I feel like that is a big difference between him and Kei, because Kei seems very lawful good. Like, he's willing to do whatever it takes to make things work and to be on the lawful side of things. But Shindo kind of comes across to me as like lawful neutral, where Shindo is kind of like, I'm going to do whatever it takes for it to go over. The system isn't everything. And I like them in front of the vending machine there. He's like, why did you call me out here? What was the real reason behind it? And she wants to know what's going to happen to Macarena now. What is Sybil's response going to be? And he's like, well, Sybil recognized you as governor, so isn't that enough of an answer? You're not a threat. You're not being threatened right now because Sybil's system is okay with you being in charge. And she's like, I suppose. And then she leaves. Yeah. I thought it was kind of like a death wish, a death flag, where she says that she's like, let's meet again. And he's like, well, Sybil system's not going to have you threatened at the moment, so we're good. I want them to be together, but I don't know how that's going to work out. Meanwhile, Kei notes that Inomiya has died because of the accident, and that's when Tima comes and gives them the cards. I got the other ones when Erie, the previous inspectors, and I were on the scene. So let's see the cards there. Which ones there are. We spoke to this man during an investigation, and there's the foxes. So there's Inomiya, and there is Azukawa's. Yep. And he's like, an investigation of what? Wait, what did he say there? I want to go back to that. When Erie, the previous inspectors, and I spoke to this man during an investigation. Oh, so they've spoken with Azusawa before. Interesting. And they're like, what investigation? Of what? And that's when he says that neither inspector told us what was we were investigating. Okay, so we're going to see Tima and Erie possibly in a flashback with Akane and Azusawa. So there was an accident. One inspector died and the other was institutionalized. So which inspector died then? Because Ganoza's alive, Kogumi's alive, Sugo's alive, Kunazuka's alive. So there must be an inspector from another division possibly that was working with Akane. And they died. And Akane was institutionalized because of it. But Azusawa was involved. Interesting. And they're like, yeah, I heard about that. The institutionalized one insists that it wasn't an accident, it was murder. Says a fox bit them. Yeah, so basically what happened to Inomiya, the fox bit the person the inspector that died, just like Inomiya died. And then we cut to Kasai after he tries. Now, Shindo tries to do the mentalist agent and tries to go to like the edge of the scene, but when he turns back, there's like the kid in front of him. And he looks behind him and sees like, it looks like a kid version of him. Right? Because then, is this him as a kid saying, no, I don't want to, Dad? Is that him? But he has the fox head? Interesting. Interesting indeed. I'm very curious what that vision meant and if we're going to go back to it. In any case, Kasai in her Gendo headquarters with upgraded furniture and a monitor of the Earth. Why not? Calls her and saying they're closing the Inomiya case. It's not important. She's donning a very similar aesthetic to Mika, so cool. They're not going to find anything more about it. As with Division 1's former inspectors, it was, both was and was not an accident. So it was and was not an accident. Okay. So basically the civil system covers its tracks in this moment by saying, oh, no, I mean, it was an accident, but it also wasn't, so we're not wrong. But if they know Akane's innocent, then why are they putting her behind bars? Why is she being institutionalized? The only thing that I can figure is because they're keeping Akane protected in this sense, that if they institutionalize Akane, then she's out of sight, out of mind, and Bifrost or whatever isn't worried about her, and maybe she can act from behind the scenes, and Kasai can kind of turn a blind eye, being like, well, I don't know, she's institutionalized, she's not here, how can we keep track of her? Who knows what she's capable of, and behind bars, who knows? I worry that Saiga has died. I wonder if Saiga... But Saiga was a latent criminal, not an inspector. I don't know. I find it interesting that Akane has a laptop and is able to work behind the scenes. And Kasai and them know that Akane is innocent, but they've institutionalized her and she's awaiting judgment. Interesting. Bitten by a fox, was it? And she says, is this a challenge to the system or an inadmissible bug in it? So basically, Kasai is saying, is Bifrost a challenge to us, to the system as a whole, and it's trying to like become the new Sybil system? Or is Bifrost just a bug within our system that we can't overlook? Either way, we need to expose it and deal with it. It's just like, what kind of a threat is it? Make good use of those two, mainly Shindo and Kei. She's like, I'm going to flush out the foxes. And Kasai is like, at any cost. And she's like, yes, thank you. Good. Good work. Interesting indeed. Interesting indeed. Kasai with her hair upgrade, got herself some bifocals. What we doing? I really liked this episode. I thought this episode was really good. It was very straightforward, but it was also like a lot of really good action, a lot of political strife as per the title, and lots of mystery that's still like, we're getting little crumbs, little IV drip, but there's still a lot more mystery to come. So I didn't talk for 2 hours, but I did talk for nearly an hour and a half. So I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back very soon with more Psycho-Pass. Bye!